So I guess the first bit that I thought was that you should all just read these again and look at statement 10, because having been involved with all that bit this morning about the thing with the project that was about what our farmers are observing and what are they doing, if you actually look at statement 10 on here, then it goes through a list of what we all UK, Austrian and German farmers came up with things that we thought were what you should be observing, or what we were observing, which included biodiversity, economic sustainability, so that was really thinking about financial viability as well, external inputs, food quality, the health of the people on the farm, the number of vet visits and treatments, use of antibiotics, etc., plant vitality, soil fertility, as you obviously heard from Lawrence about that, soil workability, which is from Lawrence about that, soil workability, which is also part of that, weeds, pests, diseases and yield. So that's, you know, that was the kind of distilled bit that we all came back out at the end of our various meetings. But then to think about what do I actually do and what do we do at Abbey Home Farm, the things that I was also thinking about is that part of these indicators are great things to say, well, this is what we're doing, but it's really about what can we act on, and also how important is that thing about saying, well, what can we do? It's a bit like Lawrence was saying there with the soil analysis. You can do those lovely, detailed, fantastic results, but I think also coming from maybe a switch from conventional to organic, that we have no quick fixes, so therefore I'm more of the kind of basic type of approach, particularly about what I'm going to do. Now that's not to say that I don't do very detailed soil analysis, but I'm using it much more as a monitoring and proving my results, rather than something I'm going to actually kind of do to say, oh my God, this is low, what am I going to do about it? Because certainly from my experience, there's a very, very limited option in terms of anything that you can do from that respect. So I guess I was trying to think about a real snappy, what do we do? So I came up with 3 R's rather than, you know, the 3 P's and all that stuff. Well, that's probably related. So I'm doing record, react and restructure. And that's the things that I think is the overriding bit that I certainly do. But alongside that, remember to not overreact, because by virtue of the way that organic systems work, it's very easy to go, that's happened, which actually quite often it will resolve itself anyway. So maybe alongside restructure we should have resolution or something like that at the end of it. Yeah. So yes, soil health, very important. As I say, we do regular soil analysis. One of the things that we've also done, right from when we started, we've monitored 3 fields every year, the same fields. So I've now got a picture over 26 years actually, because it was 92, of how those 3 fields have changed. Now again, that's not something that's meant that I particularly changed what I was doing, but it's really about kind of proving that maybe what we were doing was right, wrong or indifferent along the way. As I say, we've not really done very much to correct particular issues. Organic matter levels have risen, which is quite encouraging, because that's quite nice to say. Years and years and years ago, when we were first farming organically, I had a little thing I'd cut out of a magazine that I stuck on the wall in my office, which actually said sitting bare-bottomed on the soil was a way of deciding whether it was the right time to plant something. Now, you know, it was a nice sort of medieval person sitting there. Now, again, not to say that I actually go out there and do that, a bit like me saying you should never put something in front of an animal you wouldn't eat yourself. Well, I'm not particularly keen on silage, but it's that same idea that as a farmer, a grower, doesn't matter what you're doing, there's that kind of feeling that this is kind of the right time. You know, let's not go planting crops in the middle of freezing cold weather when you can't work the soil, etc. I think there's a lot of kind of common sense that you can use alongside that. Again, pH, where you talked about pH, well, for us in Gloucestershire, pH is through the roof. So for me, it's more about thinking about what crop I'm going to grow rather than trying to dramatically change the pH, because I could spread all the lime in the world and it wouldn't really make much difference, to be honest. Definitely thinking about learning from experience. So that's where that record keeping bit comes in again. You know, what worked, what didn't, what was a good experience. Rotation, absolutely key, both of crops and about your composted manure applications and your livestock, because those things all just work. So again, recording what you've done, did it work, where was the best bit, what worked within that. Plant health, well again, yeah, we do monitor plant diseases, but if I compare where I was when I was a conventional farmer all those years ago and thinking I could identify all these lovely diseases and everything else, now I kind of go like, yeah, it's still growing, that's good. Yields, obviously important, but also I think things like plant vigour is important. We use quite a lot of home-saved seed, so try and think about quantifying what we're doing within that, to think about, is it the right thing to save? Have we moved in the right direction, or have we actually just kept ourselves a big problem that we've been saving up? The animal health stuff, well again, a lot of it is very routine stuff. Production levels, diseases, lameness, deaths, yields, fertility, all of those things. I think people and staff working on the farm, the growers, the people that are actually doing it, how you kind of monitor what they're doing is really important as well. They need to feel empowered and confident about what they're doing, so you need to be providing training, you need to be sharing experiences to allow them to develop, because that's a massive part of the whole system. For us, we have a farm shop, so for the food that we're finally producing and letting out into the big wide world, we can get that feedback back from that. So for me, it's really important that we're looking at the quality of the food, consumer feedback, that kind of thing. Did it taste good? All the things that, you know, are pretty obvious really, I guess. Landscape, I think, is important as well, to look at what have you done as a farm. You know, we have a very wide-ranging countryside stewardship agreements in place and so on, looking at what are we doing to improve biodiversity, but also providing landscape that can be appreciated and how that also feeds back. I think that's something that's worth monitoring. And, you know, how do you do that? Well, I guess there's the really obvious things to do with feedback, where it's like the verbal, or nowadays it's all TripAdvisor, or, you know, whatever app that tells you what's going on. And then I think also looking at some of the things that we've done in the past, which were to do with collaborative research, some of it with ORC, some of it with other groups, but thinking about, you know, variety trials, phosphate, legumes, all those things, but learning from the experience, because I think you can just get so hung up on having all these little bits of monitoring that are going on, and then what are you actually going to do about it? So it's just really about, you know, is it relevant? Can you actually do something? It's another R, isn't it?
Yeah,
there we go. 4 R's. Yeah. There you go, that'll do.
Right, there's 5. Really difficult to answer this. I think this is where I feel weak really on this, because we don't formally monitor very much at all. Thinking again about soils, we do soil analysis, and I used to do it in a very completely ad hoc and utterly pointless way. When you have your organic inspection, of course, or your farm assurance inspection, say, do you do rotational soil analysis? Yes, tick. And that's all we used to do. We just used to do a bit every year. And somebody suggested to me about 4 or 5 years ago, pick a set of fields and follow that rotation round. And we're doing that. We're only 3 or 4 years in, but the same idea, to try and understand. So I'm hoping that in time that will teach me something, and I'll get some value out of soil analysis, where prior to that I didn't get any value out of it at all. We have compost, as I said. It's green waste compost in our case, so we receive a lot of green waste in, about 5,000 tonnes a year, which gives us towards 3,000 tonnes of compost. So we're in that very, very fortunate position of having an abundance of compost, green waste compost, plenty for the area that we have. Some of my fields will have had that 8, 9, 10 times now over the last 18 years, which has obviously had a huge effect on them. I no longer think about the sort of chemical soil analysis results particularly, because they're always 2s and 3s. They're never lower than that. We've never bought in any other soil amendment of any sort other than that. I've never felt the need to. On pH, we measure pH, of course, within these tests, and our pHs, we would tend to drift lower than 6, but we're always held up in that. Again, total fluke. I am such a lucky git, I really am, because 6.5's our routine with us, because compost has a liming effect. Bizarrely, even conifer-fed green waste compost is inclined to have a liming effect, which is odd, but it does. And so we effortlessly, thanks to our compost applications, hold our pHs up. In addition to that, though, I have started in the last 12 months. I have started, and it happens to be with the sector mentor scheme. I have started to try and use that as the discipline, if you like, the tool or the discipline to look more closely in a more repeatable way at soils, thinking about not the chemical analysis but the biological or the physical state of soils. And I'm learning to use that system. I'm beginning to feel a little bit more confidence with the visual assessment of soils. Slate tests I'm doing. We're doing quite, obviously, I quite like tests we do quite well in. We do. I'm thinking of giving up counting worms because we're not very good at the worms, but which is a worry. But slate tests we seem to be quite good at, so I'm all for that one, and I'm doing that quite a lot because it's very satisfying. But I think that can show us something. What this needs to happen, we need to do this for years. We need to build this experience and repeat these things to really learn from them, I think. In the first year, what it's inclined to be telling me is what I already know. And that's that, after farming all my life, you know what you're doing, you know what is right, and you know what is wrong. And we know that in spring 18, we had diabolical drilling conditions, and we drilled half to 2/3 of our farm badly in spring 18. One field in particular, we abused appallingly in order to get our oat crop in before the end of April, because I felt, well, if we don't do it soon, it won't produce anything at all. And sure enough, every time I dig it up, I think, oh yeah, I remember that. We made a terrible mess when we put it in. Where it's good is where we put it in well. So to some extent, I'm not saying there's no point to this, but to some extent it is showing me what I already know, which I think is what Lawrence was touching on really, that the experience and the gut feeling is usually right. But being honest enough to know that it was bad practice that gave rise to the problems, and trying to do better, I think, is the only thing we can try and do there, is try all the time to do better. Weather, of course, doesn't allow you to do what you want to do, so we're limited by that. Cover cropping we're doing a lot of, and I absolutely believe in that. When I say the discipline of going out, when you subscribe to something, it does make you do it, and I think that's a positive, that I am more inclined now to go out with a spade. I know I'm ashamed to say I'm one of those farmers who hasn't been a particularly regular walker with a spade, which we all, I know, should be. And this, being part of this thing, is encouraging me to do that. And for the first time, really digging under cover crops, which I would never have done, you realise that a crop like Phacelia or something like that is just beautiful underground, lovely above ground, but beautiful underground. And that's teaching me more, I think, about the benefits of these crops than I would have otherwise known. What goes on underneath. In our case, our cover crops are being grazed, and I'm all for that. We're bringing in more livestock because I believe in the value of livestock. And I think it seems to me that progressive farming, organic or non, is becoming more engaged with livestock, which is slightly against the market at the moment, which is a worry, but more than slightly. But it's undoubtedly, in my mind, it's good for our farm. But in terms of measurement, we're getting closer to our customers, we're getting more feedback on what we produce. So the quality of what we produce, when you get closer to your customers, as John is the epitome of in a way, because you speak with and deal with customers direct all the time. A lot of farmers never speak or deal with directly their customers, or their food consumers anyway, which is where we used to be as a non-organic farm many years ago, and it's still possible to be as an organic farm. I very much enjoy being closer to our customers, the people that eat the food, and getting that direct feedback, which again gives you the incentive to try and make it better. So that's a very useful tool for me. That's probably enough from me.
Great.
Actually.
Thank you.
Could you just explain what the slate test was?
Slate test it's really a measure of the glues. What would be the word for the glue? The sort of amalgates that glue the soil particles together.
Right.
So not the tricky thing as an amateur with this, and I absolutely am an amateur with this, is to distinguish between lumps of soil which are there because of compaction, which is the tempting thing to do, and sort of clusters of soil particles which are physically
genuine crumb.
Yeah, which are glued together. And the only way of separating the two is really by putting them in water to separate the two out.
Sally?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, isn't it? Well, I haven't got there yet, so it doesn't matter anyway. But anyway, one thing we did do, we had Sarah Bynum from the Bug Farm. Have you heard of the Bug Farm? Down in Pembrokeshire, well worth going. Very educational. She's been on telly a lot, Dr. Sarah Bynum. She came and did us a course on the dung beetle and how important the dung beetles are. And we have got some quite rare ones, which was quite pleasing. Be excited about a dung beetle. I know, it was quite exciting. We're also looking at herbs. The one thing we have done, we've planted quite a few herbal lays, and that was the only thing that actually kept growing in the drought this year. So I felt as though we'd scored 1 point there. Yeah, well, we're useless. I did employ part-time a permaculture student because she wanted to see it done in a bigger scale rather than a garden. But that hasn't really worked out. She's supposed to mentor us and monitor what we're doing, but it isn't really happening. Like you, I thought 3 fields, and she could, do that for us, but hasn't really materialised. So I'm not really winning, am I?
Oh, I don't know.
We've done a lot with the rock dust. I'm very much into this rock dust. We had some from Bilfwells, which wasn't very parapagnetic, but we've got some from Renning. I've got some leaflets if anybody is interested. That is amazing stuff. Again, I can't tell you much because, we haven't been doing it for long, but that's supposed to have 98 different minerals and trace elements in it. So I'm hoping the worms are like that, which they're supposed to, aren't they? So I'll have lots of worms. I like my worms. Yeah, I mean, it's all about doing things at the right time, I think. I've been anti the spread bar, slurry spread bar for years, and actually the local, our local contractor, a young lad at the time, because this has been about years, actually bought an injector especially for me. I'd gone a bit off the injector because that, if you use that too much, it made our land unstable, if you like. So we've gone more for the dribble bar. What's the other one? Another one, isn't it? Anyway, whatever. So we're using more of that so that our worms have got somewhere to go when we do, if we do put slurry on. Because I do like my worms. Yeah, so I'm still learning, aren't I?
And observations in terms of, going to see your cows, because that was the start, start of your journey. Are you sort of, you go out in the morning and you know when something's wrong almost without looking at it?
I think the Howl course has made us more observant. And I think the other one that's quite interesting is the Opsilon, but I haven't really gone there a lot yet, because that's what we've put in a new sort of feed system to have less, so we aren't working and feeding up every day. But we've got to be careful that because they're a herd, they all need, or not all, but the majority need to eat at the same time and lie down at the same time. So when you put something in to save you having to feed up every day, you've got to be careful that you've still got feed area. So we're sort of conscious of this sort of herd movement, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. But yes, it's all about observation, isn't it? And one thing I've always wanted to be able to do is to lean on the gate and have time to lean on the gate. I haven't quite got there yet. That was all back into the 2000s. I always said, we've got to have time to lean on the gate. But we don't, do we?
No.
No. And I think that is a big
It's
mistake.
undervalued.
Huh?
It's undervalued.
Undervalued completely, yeah.
For those of you who don't know, the obstinance system is a series of cards with which you can look at, and it's an aid to observation and to scoring. So you can look at the cards in terms of how the cow should be and lying and moving and so on, and you get a sense of, that's the idea. That shows some indication of some discomfort in this area and this area and this area. You need a course or sort of induction in the use, but it's a great. Few of us are immediately intuitive about animal. We do need some help. Many people with observations, and that's a great system.
I think you've got human on the board, I see there. Down in our area, there's a young woman has started a movement, the DPJ Foundation. It's for mental health, and I think that is very important in the farming community. And I think that's, if you aren't happy in what you're doing, you aren't going to make a good job of it. So I think it's Emma Picton-Jones. She's just won a big award currently. Only a youngster she is. But yes, I think you've got to watch your staff as well, that they are getting rewards from what they're doing on farm, because that makes them more responsive to everything, I think.
Can I ask, you mentioned slurry.
Yep.
What's the meal management system that you have? A slurry tank or?
Yes, the umbilical cord or the slurry tanker, depending on. But it's yes, and composting. I'm learning about composting. It's very exciting, this composting, isn't it?
What about slurry aeration?
We have got an aerator, but it's a bit of a white elephant in our area because we get so much rain. If you do it at the wrong time, you'll smear it, so you're sealing the ground. Or if you do it at a dry time, you're going to dry it out. So I don't know. It's a bit of a white elephant, that one. But yes, we use it if we can, and I think it's important because of aeration. But
Yeah.
But I think if you've got your worms, just think your worms. I'm a big worm person.
Anything on animal observations? You two?
No, I think it comes with animals. It really does come down to gut feeling, doesn't it? And spending time with them is the crucial thing. We've had sheep are new to us this year, and I started from a position of not knowing anything about sheep, and I felt I really haven't enjoyed this year because I felt that I haven't understood them, and I don't, and I'm changing the situation so that I've got somebody else who does. Because I'm not satisfied with my performance looking after them. Cattle I'm much more comfortable with, but I think you have to make the time. Maybe in dairy where you're forced to have hands-on with your cows every day, or eyes on at least. You develop a closer relationship with them than we do with beef, but we don't always get it right. And we lost a cow this autumn. Suddenly, and I'm really annoyed with that myself. That was there something I could have done to prevent that? Don't get it right.
Can I just comment on this?
Yeah.
I think a really important thing that you said, and it's really a sign of health, is that you are aware that your skills aren't enough, and that you actually have responsibility to someone else who is better. That's really important.
Peter?
I just wondered, when talking about worms, how many worms would you expect to find?
There's an optimum.
16, I think, is the figure, isn't it? Depends how big spade is, really.
No, but I mean, if you take one spade, what would you expect to find?
It depends where you are. and
Yeah,
the
of course
type.
it does. No, that's why I'm
Time of
asking.
year, how much it's rained and all
Yeah.
sorts of
And whether you're under grassland or...
Yeah, our worm counts are very low, and it does worry me. I mean, that is one thing that we're now measuring for the first time this year. And again, thanks to using this system, I am measuring it, and they're poor. And I don't know why they're poor, and that's where
Okay, question.
we
Why are you
cultivate them.
saying they're low and why are you saying they're poor? What's the standard that you're
Well,
making up? Stop.
I imagine it's a lot higher than we get, where I can dig a sort of spade size and depth hole out and not find a worm. Now, I think I should be more like double figures if I was really doing well. So whatever the standard is,
But
I'm
there
pretty
must
certain that
there
I'm
must
low.
be information out there.
Yeah.
Some
For
people
different
who know
soil
more
types.
about it, and one of them is standing over there,
Oh,
staying
right,
very
okay,
quiet.
great.
Come on then.
Okay, come on then.
But it is so variable. I know that's a
Yeah.
cop
No,
out
I'm sure it is,
reply,
but-
but you would expect to find double figures if you.
Just hurt me, I know.
But it depends on the time of year. You know, autumn and spring are the key times. They might be going deeper.
Mm.
Sorry. We'll miss that. But yeah, I guess it's just them monitoring it now and seeing.
Yeah, we
Once you
we
go out.
cultivate heavily. We're ploughing 4 years out of 5.
But even
I hear so much about I enjoyed listening to Lawrence a few minutes ago, and I subscribe to what you were describing, and that's that, and others, I've heard other people saying the same thing, Joel recently, Williams as well, and I read this some time ago, and it gave me some heart, that if you're doing something wrong, and I think we all know in organic we are cultivating more than we would like to, because it's the only way of destroying weeds and green covers reliably. So I know that we're cultivating too much, but if we can do everything else right, then we can, to a large extent, we can negate the negative of that overcultivation. But I'm perhaps wrongly, but I'm connecting our low counts on worms to our cultivation, and I'm thinking all the time, what is the answer? But we're all thinking that.
Can I just ask a sort of stupid question? Your figures are based on a sampling regime involving
going out there and digging them up,
digging a hole,
and digging a hole and
not using formaldehyde or
No,
anything
no,
like
no.
that. No.
going, spending hours in
Okay.
fields.
All right. Okay.
Can
But
I-
actually, sorry. go on.
No, you carry on.
I was
going
going
to
to say, I mean, I've done
comment.
sampling in conventional fields, arable fields, and you still get worms. There are species that can cope with that cultivation, so there might be other things.
Not
at
as
play.
simple as that.
Yeah.
Well, it's very early days, and the key to the success of this is that we continue with it. Through the summer, this summer particularly, it was extremely dry. So it might well be an explanation that they're
They
deeper
go
than
a lot
Yeah.
deeper.
Yeah.
I haven't done it through a winter yet. I haven't done it through an autumn
Summer's
yet.
not the good time. for
No.
worms.
Well, no, we're actually quite good at
Drought
worms then after all.
Yeah,
Change my
yeah.
mind.
That's what I was
We'll
going
come
to
up,
say.
we'll
Was,
come
yeah,
up.
You're going to say what?
well, I was going to say you probably picked the worst summer
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
start
Yeah,
with.
I'll go out under my facility now. Yeah.
And I'd say that definitely, well, I would say your cultivations, if you're doing ploughing 4 out of 5, well, we're probably doing the same.
Yeah.
And I think it's more, as you put on the slide that Mark said, it's about the appropriate depth.
Yeah.
It's not ploughing per se that's wrong.
Mm.
It's about if you're whacking down 18 inches, well, we couldn't do that anyway.
No.
And
Well,
every time we've tried to do non-inversion, it ends up being multiple till rather than min till.
And one of the
Yes.
things, the other
Too.
consideration here is actually where they are and species.
Yes.
So was it on your farm the Acre
No, we didn't ever try that. No.
That was at Tetbury. Because that changed. But it changed. It's changed where they were, the numbers, but actually changed where they were and where they were in the profile and the species. And you don't really know whether that was beneficial or adverse.
What changed it?
The minimum, the tillage regime with this machine called Ecodyne or whatever.
Yeah.
So you got a change, but actually, what does it mean? Is it better or worse? Because you've got a potentially higher total number, but it was in different parts of the soil.
It's a forcing type machine.
No.
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 That's multiple cultivations.
Smaggy.
Well, I'm just intrigued, we talked about observing health in soil, crops and animals. What about the people and humans? So how do you, in your project, observe the health of people and who are the people? Is it only farm workers, people who work on the farm, or?
Well, no, that's why I was saying really about, I think it's the consumer, in the wider environment really, because that's what certainly what we are aware of, is that whole thing of, you know, whether people say it was a good product or a bad product, whether they healthily did this, you know, that's all part of it. And as I referred to, you know, landscape appreciation, all that bit. I mean, I think it's all part of
I think we
the bigger picture.
I meant to pick up on that landscape, because that's absolutely the case with us. We're doing a lot of tree planting, we're doing a lot of agroforestry we're doing now, and one of the motivations is to change our landscape quite dramatically and improve it. And this is beyond the consumption of our products, obviously, but we work really hard at the quality of our footpaths and our access and things like that. And people use our farm a great deal, very, very heavily walked footpaths. And I get compliments all the time, which is lovely. And people enjoy being on our farm, I think.
But do you measure that? Do you?
No,
well,
I enjoy it though,
I think there's great scope to be had.
Yeah.
And these days, it's quite easy to measure mental well-being. It's basically, there are a number of standard questions that you can ask, normally referred to when we measure the happiness index that we do on every local authority level. And I think if we can talk to people who have regular contact, perhaps not a one-off visit, but a regular contact with the farm, we will be able to pick up how the visit to that farm, how engaging with that farm has improved our mental well-being.
Yeah.
And I think we should do it.
Yeah, I think it's quite. All I just say is it's quite difficult to ask that question sometimes. So you've almost got to be receptive to their comment rather than asking the question, because I think certainly that's what we find is, you know, you can, and we do record it was bad or it was good or whatever they've given us as a feedback or from a farm visit, but it's quite difficult. You have to sort of, it's got to be a very, very carefully worded question, if you like, to that they don't feel as though you're. So, well, why are you asking?
Yeah.
What are you saying?
And
Have I
it's
got,
not
you know,
necessarily best done by the farmer either, if you see what I mean. But because I think the question, as you say, has to be asked a little bit different. It's not necessarily feedback you want. It's actually how did the visit influence their health? What impact did it have on them? So you have to set out that, yes, I'm asking.
Well, certainly we do stuff with school visits where we have not just individual visits. We have children come and stay on the farm for 4 days, and they work on the farm. And a lot of these children come from either behavioural difficulties, backgrounds, inner cities, etc. And the feedback from that is that their health improves hugely, and that's part of why we're doing what we're doing with the farm project, to try and enable that. But again, that's feedback from the teachers saying, some of them they've turned up with a ratio of 1 to 1, and then when they're with us, they suddenly don't need all the attention because they just chill out, relax, enjoy where they are. Everything's totally different. Diet changes, take away the mobile phone, but also put them in that environment where they can appreciate and animals are brilliant. Animals don't judge. You can have the guy who's the real hard nut, whatever, give him a lamb to hold and he just turns into this, I can feel its heartbeat. Brilliant. Sorted, it's just completely different.
I just wanted to say something how I would judge soil health, plant health or animal health, because I don't think that was mentioned. The soil health, as a farmer, you first of all look at your crop. Yeah, that tells you about the soil health. Is there something wrong? Yeah, does the crop look good? But at the same time, the diversity of weeds tell you a lot. Yeah, if you have only 2 or 3, as fewer different varieties of weeds you have, as bigger problems you have in the soil. Yeah, if you have 50 different weeds, you probably don't have any problems with your soil. Yeah, as long as there's not 1 or 2 which is a lot. Yeah. The big diversity on weeds is good rather than bad side. With plants, it's the color, the shininess, quite often, the silica content, the shininess, and the sort of balance and growth you can also see. Is it too much this or too much that? With animals, there's also something about the shininess. In the fur you can see the shininess, the silica content again, the vibrant life. Are they plant is really healthy, it will access much more what comes from the soil, and the soil is very different in each plot in the field. So it will adapt much more to what's there. And so you get more diversity in plants and more diversity in animals as well. They become much more individual, more sensitive in itself. So diversity is a good sign of really healthy.
We've got to finish now.
It's 3.
3. What's the time now? 3. Thanks for that. That's very good.
Really
I
good
just
point.
would make one qualification to what you just. I agree with it, except no. The qualification is that some of these things vary from different times of year. And for example, the diversity of weeds and weed growth would vary at different times of year. What the plant's doing in terms of whether it's above ground growth or below ground growth, again, varies at different times of year, and therefore the colour varies at different times of year. So that needs to be, taken into account. It's, again, this is this whole look of the whole system. It's not just what happens in the field. This is the whole ecosystem, and this is why we actually talk about whole health and whole health agriculture, bringing all these kinds of things together. If people want to add to that as they go out, can they?
Yes, please.
So if you want either just to put there what your idea of what you think health or active, practical, positive health is, by all means fill in the thing. Or if you have some thing about observing health that we've missed, and you'd like to make the point, please also put that there.
I'd like to say that it's only unhealthy plants that get attacked by pests. If you think about it, isn't it?
That's
Healthy plants.
well, it's only unhealthy plants that get badly. The healthy plant says, "Come on, bring it on!" Bang.
Not sure that applies to deer damage.
So, Sally, thank you. Mark, thank you. John, thank you. Anya, thank you very much for whatever, and all the people at Elm Farm, Organic Research Centre, who really put up with some kind of shambolic stuff about getting these sessions together, have been remarkably patient. Sam and Anna have been great in terms of guiding us through all of this stuff. Thank you, and thanks very much for participating. Thanks a lot.